Nós somos a mudança.
Wir sind die Veränderung.
For me, the meaning resides in nature.
Alles ist miteinander verbunden.
The planet is really a piece of art.
Und wir Menschen sind Teil dieses Ökosystems.
Nós somos a floresta.
Wir sind der Wald.
I can no longer afford to just sit and wait for someone else to step up.
There has never been a time when a single individual had more power in the history of our planet.
I was born with this huge passion for animals and for wildlife, with desire to protect them. And I want to fight back for them.
Und dieser Traum bewegt, glaube ich, immer mehr Menschen auf dieser Welt.
By taking peaceful action, you make change.
Follow your heart, break the rules.
And make history.
So law has created this problem and law can amend it.
Die Erde heizt sich auf. Wir sterben bald aus.
When you live in exceptional times, you need people who break rules.
Dass die Grenzen des Systems manchmal auszuweiten sind.
Macht endlich etwas gegen die Klimakrise.
Wer schaut schon in einen Massenstall hinein?
Dass jetzt die UN erkannt hat, dass Tierschutz wirklich ein Gamechanger ist.
Und jene Dörfer überschwemmen, jene Wälder brennen und jene letzten Reserven auf Erden verderben.
I don't think the planet stands a chance if we allow that corruption to proceed.
Und gegen dieses System aufzutreten, das ist etwas, was wir alle gemeinsam tun müssen.
Mas nós também somos a solução.
Aber wir sind auch die Lösung.
What we give our children is so important, to be outdoors, to be barefoot, to touch the soil.
Wenn die 900 Menschen hier 5 weitere inspirieren.
Damit wir gemeinsam irgendetwas ändern können.
Um wirklich was zu bewegen, muss man manchmal wirklich auf den Tisch schauen.
You don't have to be black, you don't have to be Austrian, you don't have to be German, you don't have to be anything. All you have to be is a human being that shows up.
Neon Green Network begrüßt Sie zu den Erdgesprächen 2023.
Well, the house is full, yes. This is great. This is the very first time that we are in the grand hall of the Hofburg Palace, and well, you're all here. Welcome to the EARTHtalks 2023. This is already the 14th edition. We're still waiting for having EARTHtalks under the motto, "We have reached everything we ever wanted to achieve, let us celebrate." Well, unfortunately, we're not there yet, but I can promise to you that you're not only going to be informed but extremely inspired, and you're going to leave here full of confidence and optimism once our speakers are done with you, right? So, okay, it's great to have you here. My name is Manuela. I'm a political journalist for Potery-Slam and Join, and this year I have the privilege of being your facilitator, and I'm very pleased about this. This year's motto is "Protect what you love." Now let us imagine a world where all of us see ourselves as protectors of everything that is dear and important to us. That can also be some kind of activism, a conscious, a responsible life that can inspire others. Tonight we're also going to learn the limits of our own initiative, of being motivated, of activism, where we simply need to build up the pressure in order to have better laws and to put pressure on companies. Now at this point, I would like to welcome our guests of honor. And yes, I can see them. They're already in the room. A big applause for our president, Alexander von der Bellen. A big round of applause for First Lady Doris Schmiedauer. For our Minister in charge of climate protection, Leonard. And we are very pleased that we have managing directors and program managers of large environmental NGOs here in the room. Vier Pfoten, Global 2000, Greenpeace, WWF, because I hope that after the program you will have the time to talk to those people, network with them, share your ideas and concerns with them. So many wonderful corporations have been created during the Earth Talks, photo projects, campaigns, ideas, films that were conceived or developed here. So let us take a look at what kind of magic is possible tonight. Right, and now I would like to announce this year's keynote speakers and ask them to join us on the stage. They're going to tell us their stories that we can all learn from. A huge round of applause for the climate plaintiffs, Smilla, Buschbom, and Levi, Resch. A big round of applause for the veterinarian, René Anour. The glaciologist, Heïdi Sevestre. Hello. And last but not least, the performance artist, Cesy Leonard. Heïdi and Cesy, by the way, are great examples for walking the talk. They have come here by train. So thank you very much for that. But before we have a keynote presentation, I would like to ask a gentleman to join us here on the stage. And his office is just a few minutes away, and he's the patron of this event, and he will also officially open and welcome it. Neon Green Network presents Federal President Alexander van der Bellen. Ladies and gentlemen, my dear friends, dear Angie, Rattay, dear all, welcome to the Earth Talks. In preparing for this event tonight, I made a big sigh because I thought, what is it that I can share with you tonight that you don't know already? What incontrovertible facts are there that you're not familiar with yet? What inspiring stories that you haven't heard yet can I share with you? But let us stay with this point. There are so many examples that give us courage and hope. Greta Thunberg, who with her commitment has not only shaken the UN but also the entire world. The Montreal Protocol that stopped the destruction of the ozone layer and the Paris Agreement. We need to cooperate across borders. You know about all of these examples, and this is why you're here. Courageous, full of hope. You have come here with the will to change things and with the deep conviction that this can best be done if as many as possible, if possible, all people participate. Because I can't really tell you anything new. It is up to you, on the other hand. You can tell a lot of stories about the climate crisis and its impact, the melting of the glaciers, research behind that, science behind that, ecological, social change, biodiversity initiatives that move things, and ideas that move us forward. And it is important to talk about these things, to talk about them not only here and not only with each other. I know that from time to time it is wonderful to sit in your own bubble and to speak to like-minded people, but it's not enough. Especially, well, initially, any discussion and consensus seems impossible that's exactly where you should stand up and have a say. We need to bring everybody on board if we want to effectively combat global heating. And for that, we need to try to understand and encourage and inspire those who are still not quite too sure when it comes to climate movements. The really important stories of inspiration are, in my mind, not only those of Greta Thunberg or the Paris Agreement. No, it is your stories. Those stories where you, ladies and gentlemen, where you inspire other people, create an awareness, make people curious, and get them interested. For example, during Parents' Night, where we vote on whether we should recycle more, or during family dinners where children argue with their parents about whether to eat meat or not, or where we talk about whether on what kind of car we should buy, during a citizens' forums where renewable energy sources should be used more at the village level, or during a construction meeting where maybe we could plant more trees rather than having a new parking space. Or when we talk across the backyard fence about diversity of species and fertilizers or whatever. So these are stories that inspire us, and we need those stories urgently. We need to let this bubble burst. I tried to put it that way in Salzburg, whether it's in the pub or in the sports association, the football pitch, or in the theater. Talk with each other, and not only to people who are like-minded. So exchange your views with others and listen to each other. Each of these conversations is like a bridge that we build towards each other. And to ensure that our children can grow up in an intact nature, many of these bridges are necessary. It's no use to just shout across the river. That way we won't understand each other. But if we find a way to meet up with each other, maybe we can find something in the system of values of your counterpart that you can agree on, something that you have in common. For example, the wish for our children to grow up in a beautiful and peaceful world. That they can play on alpine meadows, work with crickets, that they can breathe fresh air and drink clean water, healthy forests and humming meadows. I think this is a desirable, beautiful image of the future, something we all appreciate and love. Protect what you love. This is the motto of today's Earth Talks. And this could be something that we all have in common, one abutment of a bridge that we can build our future on. And of course, many of these bridges need to be urgently built by politicians at the national and transnational level, at the EU level, and also globally. Because even though we can move a lot as individuals, but an essential task is still incumbent upon politicians. Politicians will make sure that they take this responsibility seriously if you nudge them. It just takes a little nudge, whether it's the internal combustion engines or fading out fossil fuels, speed limits, climate neutral heating systems, you name it. It is important and urgent to talk about this because we're moving on thin ice, not only when it comes to glaciers, but, well, the ice underneath our feet is cracking, not only because the glaciers are melting. We are seeing and hearing, we are even feeling the impacts of anthropogenic global warming. And we can only manage this climate crisis if all hands are on deck, as they say. So tonight, if you leave from here, from the Imperial Palace, the Hofburg, maybe you will have a chance to listen to others and listen to them. Maybe they can tell you what moves them. There are a lot of people who want to change things, and if we can manage to bring them on board beyond our own bubbles and backyard fences, and even beyond today's or tonight's event, then we stand a real chance of building a more sustainable and livable future. So my main task, ladies and gentlemen, is to declare the EARTHtalks 2023 as open. And I wish for everything that is discussed here tonight be the beginning of a lot of new, inspiring stories and conversations. Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Federal President. This takes us to the first keynote of this evening. In the past few years during the EARTHtalks, for example in 2013, we heard about polyhedrons. There is a lever that you can actuate in order to make this world a better place. There's investments, there's money, there's activism, lobbying, but a very important, a very powerful lever is law, the world of laws. In an optimum case, you can even protect planet Earth against people who want to exploit it. Or maybe not. The first keynote speakers of this evening are two people who have tried it anyway. Smilla Buschbom and Levi Resch. In February of 2023, together with 10 other young people and the lawyer Michaela Krömer, filed a climate lawsuit against the federal government with our constitutional court. This lawsuit, supported by Fridays for Future, requires that children's rights are respected. Since we cannot vote, we cannot decide who will take the big decisions. Children's rights are part of the Austrian constitution. They promise to us that political decisions will protect the rights of children today and in future. The lawsuit was rejected because of informal grounds, but it was reinstituted in autumn of this year. Smilla and Levi will report why they became climate activists. Smilla, Buschbom and Levi Resch. Those are laws, actually the rights of children. These laws apply to all children, and they're laid down in our constitution. But what do these laws say? Every child is entitled to the protection and care that is necessary for its well-being, for the best possible development and the preservation of their interests. Also, bearing in mind the justice between generations. For any climate-related measures of public and private institutions, the well-being of children need to be placed at the top of the agenda. So we are entitled to a livable future. But if we think about our future, there's something up in the air that's invisible, but that is still threatening. It's a ghost that is called the climate crisis. No, we cannot grow up without any worries or concerns. On the contrary, this ghost is everywhere. It keeps us awake, and it persecutes us wherever we go, and it's not going to go away. But how did we get there? We are living in a system in which we have greenhouse gases as if there were no tomorrow. But this tomorrow exists, and us children, we're going to have to live in this environment and deal with the consequences. And this is exactly where another aspect that we heard about previously in the law is not taken into account, namely generational justice. Now, what does this mean for us, generational justice? It is said that we also are entitled to a livable future. And conversely, this means that no other generation has the right to live at the expense of future generations. Put in banal terms, my children should also be able to see snow in winter. I want my children to experience intact forests, and what I wish for is that my children should have a chance for an easy and unproblematic childhood. In the political discourse, it often happens that we are played off against each other as generations. They're saying the young want this, the old want that, so it's young versus old, but we're all part of the solution. So as long as we're pointing fingers at each other and blame individuals or individual groups for the climate crisis, life will go on as it did, because the system is not going to change. And then we will emit even more greenhouse gases. But what gives me hope is there's a lot of people from all generations who are cooperating in the climate movement, and they're standing up together, protesting for climate protection. So we have had a petition and referendum on climate protection, but most of all, there's a consensus in science and society for climate protection. But there's also, on the other hand, a policy that not only doesn't want to understand young people and science, but they actually actively prevent the protection of our climate. And listening to that gives me a lot of anger and frustration and impotence. And I'm wondering, how did we deserve this? Are they doing this on purpose? And what else are we supposed to do? So I believe that we need to talk about the impact of the climate crisis. Greece is burning, Libya is flooded, Slovenia and Austria are underwater, and globally the heat goes up and up. We already have 1.2 degrees global warming now. This is the day-to-day climate crisis, and to be honest, that does make me afraid. I'm afraid of a future in which all these tipping points are exceeded. A fear of a future where our nature is no longer intact. And I'm afraid of a future that is no longer livable as a consequence of the climate crisis. And now what protects me against that? This piece of paper, right? Right. So these laws are supposed to protect us. A livable future is promised to all children. There are 12 children and youth, together with our lawyer, Michaela Krömer, and supported by Claw and Rights of Future. We went to the Constitutional Court, and in lieu of our generation, we tried to sue for this right, to ask for a climate protection law that deserves its name, and to claim the future that we're entitled to. Since then, I have seen a lot of reactions. There's been optimism, a pioneering mood, and then the day came, the day of the judgment, and the Constitutional Court rejected our climate lawsuit on formal grounds. Well, that hurt, and this is how it felt for us and our rights. In the course of the climate lawsuit, we had the privilege to learn more about our rights and to ask for them to be implemented. But now this lawsuit shows how difficult that is. So what is the worth of children's rights if we can't enforce them? They're worth less than the paper they're written on. So we believe that the Constitutional Court and the government are leaving us in the lurch. On the other hand, there are comments such as, well, you're still way too young, or why didn't you get a job? And to be honest, I agree, in part at least. Yes, we are way too young to be standing here. Yes, we are too young to sue the state. But we are too young to have to worry about the climate crisis every day. And you know what's even more absurd? The politicians who don't listen to scientists but continue with business as usual. And we're often treated like children, and we're only children after all. So it's like a child's play. Kuckuck, ciao. So Smilla will try to block the climate policy of the government. We go kuckuck, cha. But we, the climate and the children's rights, and we're still around. The government is closing its eyes, so we're not only talking about that, but the all-encompassing problem of the climate crisis is not solved. But for us, it is clear that the Constitution gives us a right to child welfare, and we hope that the Constitutional Court would recognize that. But they refused that on formal grounds. We really would have wanted them to deal with this on the content level. We were disappointed. But what was clear to us and remains clear is that the political level needs to immediately decide on effective measures protecting our climate. So we, young people, should not always have to ask adults to ensure those rights. The goal is to remain positive and not to convey this image of a frustrated climate activist. But we noticed how difficult it is not to be frustrated if you need to watch how the very basis of our life are destroyed. I think it is more authentic to share feelings with others, because I guess you are in the same boat, right? But it is still important for us, in light of all of this impotence, not to lose hope. The climate movement, that is to say us and you, well, we give each other a lot of strength. At the age of 14, I felt alone, naive, and impotent in dealing with the climate crisis. But then came the first Fridays for Future strike, and I'm sure that you remember these moments. Maybe you had a discussion, a presentation, a strike, a lawsuit. There are so many people to whom our future is important, and thus we can make visible what we have achieved so far. I felt left alone, but now I'm getting strength from this climate movement. And if you feel the same way, take the first step. Bring about change on a small scale, activism for an exchange among generations, to encourage, to educate, and to demand and claim our rights. All of that can be very effective if we work together. This takes us a bit closer to the goal of a livable future. But it's not only about my and your future, it's about the future of all of us. And in this room, I think we're all united by one idea, namely that the climate crisis constitutes a big problem. There's something I would like to share with you. Maybe it sounds a bit ironic that I, a 15-year-old, tells you that, but I'm quite sure about this. Nobody's too small to change things, because we have rights, and these rights are worth fighting for. This is why we'll continue out on the streets, and also at the urns and in the courts of law. We'll continue our fight. It's about all of us. We are entitled to claim our rights. Let's take it into our own hands. What a kickoff. Thank you very much. Please do take a seat. Now, we'll play the game. How many people can we fit on this sofa? Now, we'll bring the lawyer who supported you onto the stage. A big round of applause for Michaela Krömer, who helped Smilla and Levi with their lawsuit. All right, thank you very much for the fight. Michaela Krömer is a lawyer. She is a founder of CLAW, an initiative for climate law. So we heard that the lawsuit was rejected on formal grounds. So why is it so important to claim for those children's rights in terms of protection of the climate? Well, basically, it is difficult to demand those rights to be heeded. We have very strong rights as far as the content is concerned, but, well, we received a lock, but not a key. So we have no way of complaining against the failure to implement these laws. So we take the tools that we have available and we try to adapt them. This would be possible, but then, of course, the Constitutional Court would have to do some yoga. So the different positions would need to be extended a little bit for the system to be able to adapt to the present time. That's a classical development of the laws. This is nothing new, but what this means is that we need a good case and a clear foundation for the case and also a clear will to do something about it, and this is the will that is missing. And then, of course, it's easy to find formal grounds why the door needs to be closed and remain closed, and that's what's always happening in climate lawsuits. But I think you emerged stronger from this experience, the two of you, right? Yes, I think so. In the final analysis, this showed to me that we have those rights. Before that, I didn't even know that I had rights as a child. In this case, showed to me that it is possible to file a lawsuit with the Constitutional Court, that I have those rights. And unfortunately, the Constitutional Court rejected this lawsuit. This is not a final rejection, so we'll continue. Right. You've already filed the lawsuit again. So, Levi, you said you are getting a lot of support from the climate movement. So how did other people of the same age who have nothing to do with the climate movement react to your process and your activism? Well, a lot of people wrote to me on social media that they're really supporting this lawsuit, and I believe that this is the general echo we are getting from the population when it comes to the climate lawsuit, but also when it comes to protecting the climate. This is why it is so important that we network and we move ahead. And we wanted to also include this spirit in our lawsuit. Globally speaking, those climate lawsuits are a good tool that encourages people because it's a global phenomenon. Does this help? Is this a good lever that helps us to put pressure on large corporations? Well, lives are determined by rules. If you change the rules, you change the lives. So legal changes are, of course, a big lever once it is used. And, of course, it takes a while. And what we are seeing is that scientific facts are quite advanced. So you can't really deny the violations of rights. So more and more lawsuits are being won. So the legal profession is still lagging behind a little bit. And, of course, there are more and more such lawsuits, and we're winning more and more of them. So Austria is still trailing behind, sort of. The courts are still trying to find formal grounds on which to reject those lawsuits in order not to have to open the door. But of course our lives consist of rules, and if you change those rules, you change lives. And this is why it is an important lever. This can happen in a tribunal, but also outside of a court of law. So sometimes this climate lawsuit is also one on the outside. One positive example in Austria, there was a climate lawsuit against fiscal privileges of flying, and one of these privileges was changed by the government on account of this lawsuit. So sometimes things are happening also on the outside of courts of law.
So I think you give a lot of courage to young people. You encourage many people here, many young people to study law. Thank you very much for fighting. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you very much, Michaela, Krömer. ashes to ashes, dust to dust. The streets are in ashes. Smoke rises from the embers. Pale, sooty smells cover clouds of fog, laden with heavy metal and soot, drifting across the barren landscape, seemingly fleeing from the beauty of the eternal red sky. Silence cries out of necessity, deaf and forced by the red. World, we want to hear you. Humans, we want to hear you. Animals, we want to hear you. But silently, as if treading on the soles of its feet, silence now realizes that humans have reduced their civilization to ashes and dust. Volcanoes rage again. Hot lava lamps that knew their future melt in the demolished buildings from which men and women once looked out. Higher and higher they built. Deeper and deeper they looked. More and more they stole. And finally they screwed up the buildings. They stole for and never. In all the madness, did anyone say that you can't really build any higher? Then came the crisis. Everything collapsed. Deserted streets, looking onto meadows, bouncing with life, the first chance since time immemorial to change the world. The air was refreshed, as if it had just come off the press. No noise leaving the air, and before us, full of confidence, nature, giving us new courage. Beautiful, isn't it? And us? We open trade because we act in public. We walk in front gardens, in green oases, peppered with the finesse of English lawns. We push concrete out of our heads, transplanting narcissism into our pots, replacing diversity by monocultures, by monocultures, by monocultures, by mono. Stop, not like that. Yes, like that. We buy organic produce in plastic bags, which we put again in plastic at the checkout and into the plastic residual waste bag. Misappropriating plastic, we save nature by having a car-free day where everyone can walk if they want to. We talk about climate change instead of climate trade. Climate crisis. China is rotten, those polluters, and us skiing on meadows, chairlifts, après-ski, snow guns vis-a-vis, shoot money into summer gaps, close the tent because of summer mosquitoes. A tent can be delightful, but hypocrisy rides on pious backs, self-centered eye in love, blind to what surrounds you. You seem to be in permanent loops, lacking any profile, trapped in a talk that knows no mature ideas. For you are part of a machine called the industry of selfishness. The present is dominated by the superego because no one is more happy than a human being about themselves. No wonder the environment suffers when people choose only to be human. Yet the solution is so close and similar to someone breaking into a crowded house. More insight in advance, thinking ahead instead of thinking in the hallway than you can give if necessary, and give your children a future on probation. The top hat sits in the upper class. Money drives us. Success is the stuff that dreams are made of. Fuel is what you get when you combine two elements of the last sentence. And what is left? We have driven to success. And what remains? That we have been successful. And what remains? Nothing. Because we too are only ephemeral, like vapor trails, which, for lack of a horizon, drift past a consensus of their existence. Condolence ribbons for all those who do not understand the consequences of the present time. Sebastian Woves. Sebastian Woves, also known as the Wastel with his text Ashes to Ashes. Thank you so much. Also, slam poetry can be activism or is activism. Thank you very much. Now we move away from poetry towards science, towards the twin crisis, biodiversity. So, Sebastian just mentioned it. Without diversity, without soils that we can use, we are lost. Our next speaker does not only deal with the question, how can we protect nature, but he also inspires us with his research to take a look at the things that we can learn from nature. What do we need in order to stay healthy and to mitigate pain? René Anour studied veterinary medicine in Vienna, specializing in the emerging field of conservation medicine. which examines the interaction between animals and ecosystems. While working on his PhD, he conducted research in the field of pathophysiology, including a research stay at Harvard Medical School. We learn from animals how to treat pain without becoming addicted to it. We learn from animals how to lower blood pressure in patients with hypertension. His first non-fiction book, The Noah's Ark Principle, explains in an entertaining way how special adaptations of the animal world could defeat human diseases. The naked mole rat almost never gets cancer, and researchers around the world are trying to find out why. Neon Green Network presents René Anour. Good evening. The animal kingdom, as you might have heard, has made me go wow whenever I take a walk and I see a little weasel, the smallest predator that we know, and it has just preyed upon a vole. Then it makes me wow. It's really amazing, but the animal kingdom can do much more than to make a nerd like me go wow. The animal kingdom, biodiversity in the animal kingdom harbors an extreme value for our health. And we have known it for quite a long time from plants, and biodiversity research has only recently become the focus of attention. And today I would like to present some selected examples of which I hope that you will find them interesting and that they will make you go wow. The first example are these two admittedly very cute animals, two alpacas. So they are part of the camel family, and in the blood of these animals something special was detected. A very small and lightweight form of antibodies. They are especially stable and can sustain temperature of up to 90 degrees, and they can bind starch. And what does that mean? As a matter of fact, conventional and big antibodies are one of the most important types of drugs that we have. We use them for against tumors, for example, and also against infections. And for all these diseases, we think that these lightweight antibodies in the blood of camels can act as a role model in order to reach even more efficiency, even more healing when it comes to these diseases. And this is not everything, and maybe they can also overcome the blood-brain barrier, offering opportunities for curing Alzheimer's disease in the future. And if you say, well, so this is all a long way off, then I would like to tell you, you are right. Research is still in its infancy, but the market of conventional antibodies is worth 130 million euros. So this is a representative of the American otter, actually the lancehead viper. An American student found a substance that he used as a role model for hypotensive agents, the so-called ACE inhibitors, and they have been that successful that we can well assume that nowadays 10% of all those older than 55 years will get this medication in order to fight this insidious disease successfully. And I think also in this respect we should thank the lancehead viper. 5 billion of individual doses have been sold in Germany alone. Now I want to talk about an animal that you're all familiar with and what this animal eats and where it lives. You all know it, but maybe I have a little story that you are not familiar with. In the immune system of panda bears, very, very small defense peptides have been detected. And what can they achieve? So they bore into the walls of bacteria so that they die off. And what is especially interesting is that they bore into the cell walls of bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics and make them die. And these peptides were found also in snakes. And currently there is some research going on in order to see if these peptides could be used against infections. And only to show you how big this problem is, there are estimations saying that 1.2 million people die from infections by bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics. Thank you very much, dear panda bear. Now I would like to talk a very, very funny animal, the pufferfish. Most of you might have heard that pufferfish are highly poisonous. 1/1000th of a gram is enough to kill an adult human. Whoever came up with the idea to eat these animals, I think this is a very, very stupid idea, but this is just my personal opinion. But the venom of the pufferfish is not only lethal in a very small doses, it can be very helpful when it comes to treating cancer patients suffering from pain where nothing else helps. Just fathom that for a moment. And this venom can be extremely helpful to such an extent that one injection is sufficient in order to alleviate patients' pain. 90% of all cancer patients in the course of their disease suffer from tumor-related pain. Let's talk about venoms. This is a bit eerie, so I think that this animal is very beautiful. It's a representative of the spider bird, and the poison of spiders and scorpions used to be a mystery for research because the amounts were that small that they couldn't not really be analyzed. And meanwhile, this is possible, technically speaking, and hundreds of biologically active substances have been found, and we do not know as of yet what they can do. And one of these molecules is just being researched in California, and researchers think that this molecule could be stronger than opioids and could not cause addiction. And of course, clinical experiments have to confirm this, but just imagine for how many people this could be important. 20% of humans suffer from chronic pain, unfortunately. And of course, we do not want to turn them into addicts. And now I want to present to you the most awesome animal that I can think of. And it's also the most beautiful animal, I think. So this is the naked mole rat. I think you heard a little bit about this animal in the introduction. So this animal, it's highly interesting because it doesn't age. It becomes 10 times as old as an animal of its size. And these animals, the oldest animals, defend their burrow. And this is absolutely great. And this is not all. So I feel like someone trying to sell something on a teleshopping channel. Naked mole rats hardly ever get cancer, and this is absolutely unique if you consider that this is a mammal, and researchers are in the process of finding out why. And on top of that, the naked mole rat doesn't feel any pain. It might feel a stimulus, but not pain. So what would this mean for us if we were to resolve this riddle, if we maybe would have 20 million people annually without this harrowing diagnosis, and for which we could alleviate this physical pain. This is something which is invaluable. And now I would like to ask you, which animals are we to save now? Only the ones that are useful to us? The truth is, we have just started to unearth this big treasure of biodiversity. We do not know where the next big discovery will be. We only know it awaits us in all probability here or here. And in all probability not here and not here. Not at all. So we should really focus on grasping biodiversity in its entirety, also species that do not seem to be that useful. We should save them from becoming extinct. Protect what you love. Thank you very much. René, Anour, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. It was a very beautiful animal resembling Benjamin Button a little bit and develops backward as far as aging is concerned. So please give a big hand to people in Austria fighting against the sealing of the soil. Please give it up for the general manager of WWF Austria, Andrea Johanides. Hello, thank you very much for being here. WWF celebrated its 60th anniversary. How has activism changed over the last 60 years? Activism when it comes to the environment, it has changed a lot. But before I start, I would like to say thank you. So I heard something about our own logo that I didn't know about, the panda bear logo. Thank you very much for the information. A lot has changed indeed. 60 years of WWF. I think this is an excellent opportunity to look back at our achievements and, of course, the problems of today. So they are quite different, of course, but they have shown that things are possible. So we are confronted with big challenges. Now the need of the hour is to look at possible solutions, and this should also be a motivation to continue and to tackle the big problems. So I think in all confidence I can say today that Austria would look different if the WWF wouldn't have been around. Just a few examples. The list, of course, is non-exhaustive because we talked about animal species. There are species that used to be extinct in Austria. For example, the lynx, the bald eagle. And we could save these animals, but there are also other successes. WWF was very active when it comes to establishing national parks in Austria, a very recent example of which we are particularly proud because it entailed more than 20 years of work. So we have been very active in establishing the first 5-country biosphere park worldwide. What all these stories have in common is the fact that they haven't happened overnight. So we were in for the long haul. A lot of work was entailed. Many people threw spanners in our works. And I think these stories show very well that excellent solutions are possible. And if you take a look at the situation today, we can rightly say, of course, all these individual successes that I have mentioned are very important. Yes, indeed. But of course, we should also direct our gaze to the big picture. So we are in the midst of a climate crisis. So we are losing species, we are losing biodiversity. We are talking about a twin crisis. Twin crises, of course, reinforce each other. So we have to tackle these crises in parallel. And we have to acknowledge that they are all important. On the one hand, we are talking about climate protection, but if you think about the fact that the WWF publishes the Living Planet Report and the Living Planet Index, and if you take a look at shrinking biodiversity, then you can see that for 50 years, WWF has been looking at a stock of vertebrate animals, and it has declined by 70% in 50 years. The situation in Austria is not much better. There are studies showing that the stocks, when it comes to bird populations, have gone down by 50% in 25 years. So we are massively losing when it comes to animal species. We are losing biodiversity, and thus we are also losing valuable habitats and ecosystems on which we depend. But on the other hand, we, of course, seal surfaces, but not only surfaces. Before I talk about land consumption, I would like to mention which is very often neglected. Austria, for example, has lost 90% of peat surfaces. They're very important. On the one hand, they are important habitats for very rare species, and on the other hand, they are CO2 reservoirs. So this means that we destroy our biggest allies. It is the case that we as Austrians have confidence, so we act as a pioneer when it comes to environmentalism. Is this true, René? Or do you think that we are too optimistic in this regard? So I think we are a bit too optimistic in that regard. So I think there is a big group of people who have understood the true value of biodiversity. But on a personal note, I would say that there is always a better reason for many people to build the next shopping mall. So the value of a natural surface is not considered sufficiently. Maybe we have not grasped what is destroyed here in terms of species. Biodiversity doesn't have to be of use. It's good that it is around. But I attempted a little bit to add a little bit more value to this in order to create awareness that it is very important to prevent the sealing of surfaces. Of course, we do not have to monetize everything, but we hurt ourselves if we are not careful. Andrea, Johanides, what could people in the room do right now in order to protect biodiversity in Austria? There are many things that we could do, of course. You could sign our petitions. Nature instead of concrete, voracious grabbing of lands, but a mega project in the Tyrol Kaunertal Valley affecting a peat surface. So signing petitions is one thing, but I would like to briefly talk about the topic of soils, because Austria is very bad in this regard. We are a European champion when it comes to the sealing of surfaces. We need biodiversity, not only because we like it, but because this is the basis of our livelihoods, intact nature. And on a daily basis, we irretrievably seal 12 hectares. This is soil. that is important for tackling the climate crisis, and these 12 hectares, we would need them in order to store water and to grow food. So the sealing of soil and the benefit for us, I think, is very important and is inextricably linked to the protection of species. Thank you very much for mentioning this topic. Please give it up for Andrea Johanides. So the effects of the climate crisis, we have felt it, but then there are the places, of course, where we can see with our very own eyes where tilting points are exceeded, and these constitute the boundaries where things are lost, where the climate is damaged in such a way that it cannot be prevented. So this is the Arctic landscape. And for a very long time, we have turned a blind eye to the dramatic development in the Arctic Sea. And thank God there is someone here living in the eternal ice and will give us a first-hand account. Heïdi Sevestre is a glaciologist working for the Arctic Council's Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program. She has a PhD from the University of Oslo, where her research helped to update a global model of glacier flows. Sevestre is a member of the Explorers Club, the Protect Our Winters Europe Expert Committee, and a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society. She was awarded the Shackleton Medal in 2022 for her work in polar conservation. She has appeared in numerous National Geographic documentaries, BBC, ZDF, ITV, and France Télévisions. Heïdi Sevestre teaches glaciology at the University Center in Svalbard-Spitsbergen and regularly leads scientific expeditions to polar and high mountain regions.
Mit ihrer Arbeit möchte sie
Through her work, she aims to make scientific knowledge more accessible and motivate action in the fight against the climate crisis. Neon Green Network introduces Heïdi Sevestre.
Thank you so very much for the warm welcome. I feel extremely privileged to be here with you tonight. So as you heard, my heart is truly in the ice. This is what I study for a living, and this is what I love the most. I wanted to start this talk with a fact that will blow your mind. I don't know if you're aware of the fact that Homo sapiens sapiens have never known a planet without ice. We have always developed, we have migrated, we have thrived on a planet that had glaciers high up in the mountains and ice in the polar regions. But today we need to be fully aware of the fact that we are losing these glaciers. And I'm aware that we're in Austria. You've all seen glaciers before. You all know how beautiful they are. But are you truly aware that we are about to risk it all today? I've always been fascinated by these glaciers from a very, very young age. I was born in the French Alps with both of my parents taking me all the time to explore mountains. And when I was 16, I actually met someone who totally changed my life. He was a mountain guide from Switzerland. His name was Hubert. And Hubert told me that, I should think about my life, my career, and that there were people on Earth who are paid to study ice. And I thought, wait, that is the coolest job. I really need to become a glaciologist. And so This is what I do today. You know, I get to be a doctor who has ice as my patients. You know, glaciers are not very talkative, but our job is to make them talk. We want them to tell us everything. Tell us what's happening to our planet, tell us what's happening to our climate. And the very, very first glacier that I studied was this one. I mean, look at this. Look at this massive piece of ice. This is the Trien Glacier in Switzerland. Back in the days, in 1891, it was just majestic. I mean, the glacier was so big at the time that people were actually mining the ice. So this is how we dealt with glaciers before. We used to cut pieces of ice, and these blocks of ice were being sent all across Switzerland, all across France, to help preserve food. We didn't have freezers, we didn't have fridges, but we had glaciers. And when I studied this glacier, contrary to what my students think sometimes, it wasn't in 1891, but it was in 2010. And this is what the glacier looked like back in 2010. What you see here is two pictures taken from exactly the same location, and we see massive differences between the two. There you see that something happened between the two pictures. And these glaciers are the best barometers of climate changes. There's nothing better on Earth telling us that the temperatures are changing, telling us that the precipitations are changing. This is the superpower of our glaciers. They make the invisible visible. We don't see CO2 concentrations increasing in the atmosphere, but we see this. We see a disaster in the making. So my question to you is, but why do we need these glaciers for? And I think there are no better places than Vienna, actually, to explain why we should care and why you should care. We should care for all the reasons you see here. Because these glaciers, along with the snow, are some of the best water towers that we have on Earth. Every summer, we expect to get free water from these glaciers. This is fresh water that we use for drinking, fresh water we use to produce electricity, water we use to irrigate crops, to maintain the discharge of our rivers during the summer months. In my country, we even cool down nuclear power plants with the water from the glaciers. Understand how precious they are. But today, it seems that we're trying our very hardest to make them disappear. Every single day, a bit faster than the day before. Not only these glaciers are disappearing fast, but also, in some regions, the glaciers are simply collapsing. Over the past 2 weeks, I was actually not far from here. I was in the Italian Dolomites, and I spent quite a few days around a glacier that you might have heard about, called the Marmolada Glacier. Last year, in July 2022, it was a Sunday, and there were a lot of people hiking in the mountains. It was a beautiful day. Temperatures were really high. And what happened that day really surprised everyone. This is what happened to the Marmolada Glacier. 64,000 tons of ice and water came crashing down the glacier as it was collapsing. The water fell down the mountain at 300 kilometers per hour, and 11 people died at that very moment. This is something that we couldn't predict. This is something that is very hard to detect in alpine glaciers, but this is the reality of climate change in the Alps. Climate change kills in our mountains. Let's be very clear about this. But what we're also seeing is that not only glaciers are melting, glaciers are collapsing, but it seems that we're giving them an extra nudge these days, even in this country. This is what is currently happening right now as we speak. There are excavators digging into these glaciers. And you know why they're digging into the ice? Because in a couple of weeks, a few skiers are going to get the chance to ski down mountains that do not have much snow at the moment. This is how we're helping the glaciers. This is how we're treating these global commons. This is not only happening in Austria, but actually all over the Alps. And the news about the excavations in Austria reached the highlights of the news in France, actually. You know, everything that's happening here is making headlines all over Europe, and we really need to think long and hard about what we're going to tell all children and the children of our children about how we dealt with our glaciers. Today, if we continue on the current trajectory of emitting more and more CO2 in the atmosphere, we can bid goodbye to all of this. You know, we will absolutely lose the majority of the alpine glaciers in the next few decades. So look at how mesmerizing landscapes like the one that was just shown are. You know, when we see pictures of landscapes with ice, we will never see these mountains as beautiful as they are today. So you're aware of what's happening in the Alps, but now I wanted to zoom out a little bit and take you to a place where I live, which you heard about. It is the Arctic. This is what the Arctic is like. So the Arctic is north, around the North Pole, and this is the planet seen from the Arctic. The Arctic is an ocean that is surrounded by land masses that are covered with a lot of ice. And on the ocean itself, we have a big piece of ice that is called Arctic sea ice. To the big despair of my parents and my family, this is where I live parts of the year. It is a place called Spitsbergen or Svalbard, and it is beautiful. This place is just another planet. I mean, what you're seeing here is actually the northernmost town in the world. It's called Longyearbyen, 2,500 inhabitants, 3,000 polar bears, and it is a place that looks like nowhere else on Earth. Everything there is made of ice. The ground is frozen, we have glaciers everywhere, we have snow most of the year. But the reason why I'm telling you about Svalbard today, about Spitsbergen, is because nowhere else on Earth is warming as quickly as this place. This is what we're observing in Spitsbergen. So their climate change is a reality, it's something that we see every day. We have the ground that is thawing and collapsing. We have sometimes biblical rains in the middle of winter when it's supposed to be -30. And the most dramatic events have been what you see in the lower right corner. Spitsbergen is typically an Arctic desert, so it's supposed to be very cold, it's supposed to be very dry, but with global warming, the temperatures have gained 6 degrees since the 1960s. So the air masses are getting warmer and warmer, and because they're getting warmer and warmer, they can carry more humidity. And so therefore, if we see the picture I was just showing again, what we're seeing there in Spitsbergen is actually avalanches that are coming to crash down on our little town. This was again a Sunday, and it was a Sunday in December. It's already dark for a month. We don't see sunlight for another month and a half. And we had a week of terrible weather, of a lot of snow, a huge blizzard. And people were in their homes, having breakfasts with their family, wearing their pajamas, and from one second to the next, there were thousands of tons of snow that crashed down into this video, and please do not stop the video, keep showing it. This is the life of Arctic sea ice. So again, it's a crust of ice that is floating over the ocean. What you're seeing here is that during the winter it expands, which is normal. During the summer it recedes, which is also normal. Sea ice has a superpower that we depend on every single day, even here in Vienna. It is simply a big white surface. And because it is white, it reflects solar radiation back into space. It's like wearing a white t-shirt during the summer months. Well, Arctic sea ice is the white t-shirts of the northern hemisphere. If we don't have Arctic sea ice, what we have instead is an ocean that would be much darker, that would absorb solar radiation so much more readily. The older sea ice is, the thicker it is, the whiter it is. But what is currently happening is that Arctic sea ice is dying. Every time we burn coal, oil and gas, it is directly attacking the old Arctic sea ice. And see the changes that are currently happening before your eyes. The changes are so much faster than we predicted. So it seems that we're trying everything we can to make this sea ice disappear as quickly as possible. The sea ice is receding more and more. We've lost about 45% of the surface of Arctic sea ice in 40 years. And instead, the ocean is simply getting bigger and bigger and getting warmer and warmer. Just a few months ago, a study was published showing us that it is very likely that in the next 7 to 10 years, we might see our first summers without sea ice in the Arctic. So what does that mean for us back here in Vienna? It means that the winds will be disturbed, it means that the ocean currents will be disturbed, it means this: more frequent and more extreme weather events. It's not just sea ice that is important, it is also the ice sheets. We have 2 big ice sheets on Earth. We have Greenland in the north, we have Antarctica in the south. The 2 of them, I'm not sure you're aware of this, the 2 of them contain enough ice to increase sea levels globally by 65 meters. And what you see here on this little time lapse is the places where these ice sheets are currently losing mass, the places in orange and dark red. They are losing more and more ice every year, and what does that mean for us? It means that even here in Vienna, in a landlocked country, we will have to deal with this. With London, that will be underwater partly. This is Bangkok with 2 meters of sea level rise, and this is Europe with 3 meters of sea level rise. It is very likely that we can get more than 1 meter of sea level rise before the end of the century if we continue to sponsor the fossil fuel industry, if we continue to give them so much subsidies, and if we continue to use as much fossil fuels as today. I really wanted to show you this graph tonight. If there was only one slide I had to show you, it was this one. This one is terrifying. What you see on the left-hand side is a series of ecosystems. We can take the first one, the Greenland ice sheet. On the right-hand side, you see a series of temperatures. The little red ball is, to the best of our knowledge, where we think these ecosystems are going to collapse. We have increased global temperatures by 1.2 degrees. We know that if we reach 1.5 degrees globally, Greenland could begin to collapse. And Greenland holds enough ice to increase sea levels by 6 to 7 meters. It doesn't mean that we'll get the 6 to 7 meters instantly, absolutely not. But it means that no matter what we do after crossing 1.5 degrees, will be irreversible. It will be irreversible that Greenland will continue to collapse. So please, find your favorite ecosystem and see the tipping points of these ecosystems as the temperatures we shouldn't cross. You know where we're heading today. We're not heading to below 1.5, we're heading there. We're heading to 2.7 to 3 degrees of temperature increase. But keep in mind that this little red line, it doesn't have to stay there. It cannot stay there. What you're seeing here is basically something that is non-negotiable. We cannot negotiate with the fact that Greenland, beyond 1.5 degrees, will start to collapse. We cannot negotiate with Western Antarctica and asking it to change its tipping points. This is non-negotiable. And therefore, our strategy should absolutely rise up to the challenge that is these tipping points. What we're losing with climate change is not just this. It's not just numbers, it's not just ecosystems, it's also pure natural beauty. It's also what makes us wonder, what makes us dream. You know, when I spend time in an ice cave in the Arctic, I I just cannot believe what I'm looking at. We know that nature is the best artist we have here on this planet. And this is also what we lose when we lose these glaciers. Not only we use this pure beauty, I think about Luca now so very hard. You know, we really need to think about how the future generations are going to think back at what happened on the 18th of October 2023. This is our collective responsibility, and the future generations will never forgive us if we make the wrong move. And in order to illustrate this, I wanted to share with you a little poem. So the poem begins like this. It's 3:23 in the morning and I'm awake. Because my great-great-grandchildren won't let me sleep. My great-great-grandchildren ask me in dreams, what did you do when the planet was plundered? What did you do when the earth was unraveling? Surely you did something when the seasons started fading. As the mammals, the reptiles, and the birds were all dying. Did you fill the streets with protests when democracy was stolen? What did you do once you knew? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heïdi, for this. I'm very moved. You made a similar point that René already did. Yes, we need nature to stay intact, but it's not just about us surviving or needing anything from it. It's just also magnificently beautiful. And I cannot believe the place you're living at.
You know, I think as scientists we should never forget that even us, we have a little heart beating.
A little one,
a
but
little
still.
One. But we have been communicating science through reports, through publications, and you know, we're 30 years in IPCC reports. Mm-hmm. And CO2 concentrations keep rising in the atmosphere. And I know for many, many reasons. But it's crucial today that the scientific community also continues the fight. Mm-hmm. And we need to go beyond the reports. We need to go beyond the publications. And we need to speak with our hearts today. You know, I deeply care about these environments. When I see excavators digging glaciers, a little part of me is dying when I see this. Mm-hmm. But I think what an amazing motivation to wake up in the morning, what is currently happening today. You know, we might see the climate crisis as something that is way too big, that is way too complicated, way too challenging for us. But what an amazing chance we have to be born right now. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, it's crazy, the chance that we have.
Exactly.
You know, we can literally try to save humanity, and we will never manage to do this by ourselves. But when I see what's happening tonight, absolutely we can manage. Yeah. You know, let's keep waking up in the morning with this positivity, with this rage to change things for the better, and we will manage to do it.
And thank you also for breaking down science in the way you did, because our president gave us the mission to talk to our neighbors, to argue at parties, to explain climate change. And I mean, this example of sea ice and how you compared it to wearing a white shirt, I mean, everyone can understand that. It's just very logical and very graphical. And yeah, thank you so much for that. Ich möchte jetzt...
And now I will ask two people to join us here on the stage who are also fighting to protect the ice and our winters. A big round of applause, please, for the Managing Director of Protect Our Winters Austria, Moritz Nachtschatt. And for the world champion in snowboarding of the Freeride World Tour, Manuela Mandl. I'm sitting on cardboard. I don't want to become a YouTube star. So if anything were to happen here, please don't make a video. Dear Manuela, let me start with you. You're a part of the Athletes Alliance of Protect Our Winters Austria. You're committed to climate protection. We've heard from Heïdi what's happening in the name of winter sports when it comes to professional winter sports. And there's also a lot of money involved, not only in winter sports, but also tourism, of course. But do you have the feeling that in your community, among the athletes, there are more voices who are saying, we don't want that, not that way? Yes, of course. That's a problem that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. Everybody, also the Austrian ski racers of the Austrian Skiing Association, are finding it hard to find slopes to train on. And I myself came to freeride on the Dachstein mountain, and well, we always heard that the Dachstein is a ski region no longer exists, right? It all had to be taken down and dismantled because the pylons of the ski lift could no longer stand straight on the glacier because it has withdrawn. So it's not so long ago. This happened a couple of years ago. And of course we can say, well, great, now I can snowboard less, but that's not what it's about. So we learn about these things, and we have a greater awareness in our community. We keep talking about it because it is important. And we are just the tip of the pyramid. Well, the fact that winter sports will no longer be able to be performed on the Dachstein mountain, well, it's devastating how quickly this is happening. But are the major sports associations reacting to that? Do you think that a message is being heard? Well, especially the major sports associations. Well, it may take a little work to convince them, but there are some sports associations that are aware. The Biathlon Association, for example, the Biathlon Union, they're really wonderful here. They're a role model. Not the FIS, no, definitely not. But I don't want to anticipate this, but we've already launched a campaign with Julian Schütter at the beginning of the year. The biggest problem is transparency. So FIS stating that they're climate positive, which I believe we can all agree that that's just laughable. But nobody's asking for that. We want them to be transparent. We want them to say what it is that they cause. And, well, we don't see the effect, of course, but lying to us, well, this is simply counterproductive. Well, let me pick this up. You just said it. Julian Schütter, an OSV athlete, together with many stars, wrote an open letter to FIS, the International Skiing Federation. So this is the open letter, in order to get people to think differently. This extremely difficult as it appears, but anyway, the most successful people are participating with their platforms in this effort, and one of these people sent us a video message.
Supporting climate action, but I do want to say how much I support this topic. Hi, Mr. President. It's Michaela Schifrin. I just want to say I'm sorry that I can't be there in person with you today supporting climate action, but I do want to say how much I support this topic and what we depend on, what we love the most in life is our winter. We love our winter sports, and we have to keep pushing federations and every possible participating partner to keep working towards climate action and keep making the effort to lower our impact on the world we love so that we can keep using it the way that we love. So thank you so much. I really support this and yeah, keep going with it.
Well, a question for you both. What do you want us to change? What should FIS be doing differently? And what should other winter sports associations do differently in future? Well, when it comes to FIS, like I said, it's about more transparency. So they should stop using the term climate positive. They simply shouldn't use this term anymore because it is just a blatant lie. And they tend to forget that they should serve as role models. And that way, they can't be a role model. What we also are asking for is not only transparency, but also that they should stick to their self-defined goals. They're part of the UN Climate Action Network, so Sports for Climate Action Networks. So they have voluntarily committed themselves to reduce their emissions by 50% by 2030, but they have no plan to achieve this. So they should reveal a plan. This is a clear demand, and the race calendar should be adapted to the actual seasons. So just look to Sölden. A week ago in Sölden, there was just rocks, no snow. And then 2 days ago, they started carting a lot of snow there. I don't know how many cubic meters. So they had saved it. They had planned ahead. But it's still not okay. And in order to make the World Cup start possible, they also removed a lot of the glacier's tongue. And this is terrible. So that doesn't have such a big impact on the climate crisis itself, but the image that this conveys, is that really what the skiing industry wants to stand for? Well, clearly no, I don't think we shouldn't do this. Skiing is incredibly important here in Austria. It is still a mass sport, so more than 38% of all Austrians ski. And as far as that is concerned, of course, this is also a business factor. And Austria should serve as a role model. The skiing industry should serve as a role model, because if we don't do it, who should? And of course, the International Skiing Federation has a lot to contribute, because the ski resorts do what FIS tells them to. And the athletes should also serve as role models, I guess, right?
Of course, we try to exert our influence with what we purport to the outside. I, for example, use the climate tickets. So I use the climate ticket a lot using the train, or if you go on skiing holiday, for example, then of course it would be very good to use the train, because 70% of emissions are accounted for by emissions when traveling to and from the skiing regions. And there are many attractive offers, and I think a lot can be done in this respect, and you can still enjoy winter. Yes, of course, I understand you do not want to be in the fog all the time. And I think this should be doable for as many people as possible. So with Andrea Johanides, we talked with Andrea Johanides, and we said that responsibility shouldn't always be foisted upon individuals. But of course, if you transport your skiing equipment by bus or by car, of course you're part of the problem. So thank you very much for these interesting thoughts. So we have another overall World Cup winner, Alexandra Meisnitzer. Give her a big round of applause, please. First of all, so we always crossed our fingers when we watched you skiing. Now we have heard Michaela Schifrin, the most successful ski racer of all times, who, with her strong commitment for climate activism, would you have thought that as an activist and as an athlete, especially you have to become an activist? Well, so my skiing days are long gone, and of course the glaciers have developed, and it breaks my heart taking a look at this development. I'm still an enthusiastic skier. Not taking to the slopes is not an option. But I agree with Michaela Schifrin, we should act very sparingly on the resources so that we can ensure top athletic quality. And we also heard it during the Poetry-Slam when Davastel talked about chairlifts and so on, snow guns. But there are very many regions are acting very sustainably. For example, the Saalbach region. And I was very surprised at first that we didn't win the first round. I thought we had a very attractive concept, and then I saw that other topics are at least as important. We have been criticized a lot, and not everything is negative. So it's very important not to play off ecology and economy. I'm a big fan of exchange, and I think this is a great event. Only if we exchange our opinions, we can make great strides. I would like to thank our young people for all their contributions. Our children should not only see the snow, but also feel the snow and use the wonderful slopes. And this is why it needs all of us joining forces, the FIS Association, of course. As Moritz said, what would be so important would be to show some flexibility, to use the levers where we need it, and also when we do it. You have to be in the right place at the right time. We have to become more flexible in terms of travel planning, and then we can be very, very successful without us having to renounce anything. Amen. Thank you so much. Protect what you love, protect our winters in that case. Thank you very much, and please give it up for our panelists. Moritz wants to add something. Yes, so the open letter was originally signed by 140 athletes, and it was handed over in February, and ever since it had been signed by 500 FIS athletes. But there haven't been many commitments coming from the FIS Association, only small changes. A sustainability manager was hired, but unfortunately she doesn't really have any power to implement things. And the World Cup was delayed by 1 week instead of 1 month. And this is why we now proceed to the second round. And today, you might have heard that also in Zermatt, a glacier was removed. And this is why we are starting a new petition tomorrow, which you can all sign. So I would like to appeal to you. Please go on social media And please keep your eyes open, sign the petition, and also if you're interested in snowboard events or skiing events, so please make these part of your blog posts on the internet, for example, or if you see, for example, that events are held on the skiing slope, so please also concentrate on this, because this must be made part of media reports. Lots of luck for this season. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your work. So we're hitting the home stretch now. Our next speaker has a toolkit rife with different communication means that she uses in order to give us fodder for thought, in order to make us laugh, to trigger anger and to reduce anger. But it's very, very important to shake the world and to spread political activism. Cesy Leonard is a performance artist and founder of Radical Daughters. After studying acting in Berlin, she worked in film, television, and theater until she later became a director and fought against cliched images of women. For more than 8 years, she was a member of the artistic staff of the Center for Political Beauty, with productions at the Gorki Theater, the Munich Kammerspiele, and the Wien Woche. She is particularly interested in the political empowerment of young people at the interface between art and reality. You are angry about the situation at your vocational school. Yes, you are political. You think being political means having read a few books. That's nonsense. With Radical Daughters, she inspires people to take action and stand up for democracy, freedom, equality, and brotherhood and sisterhood. The Neon Green Network presents Cesy Leonard. Very nice. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be able to speak here today, especially after such inspiring speakers. Thank you so much. And today I would like to talk about courage and inspiration. But of course, I also want to consider that if we watch the news, then of course, very often we feel very, very powerless, devoid of courage. And thus I would like to start with something very interactive. You've been sitting for quite a long time. I would like to ask you to ask this following question. How confident do you feel? How optimistic do you feel? Directing your gaze to the world. And I would like to ask you, if you say, yes, we feel very, very optimistic, then please stand up and stretch your arms upwards. If you're not that sure, if you're just a little bit optimistic, please remain seated. And if you feel powerless at the moment, then please go down to the floor. Let's try it all together. 3, 2, 1. And the ones of you who cannot stand up, so please raise your hands or stretch them towards the floor. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So please take a seat again. Big applause for all of you. Thank you so much for your honesty. Thank you so much. So I can't see the slides. I'm clicking like mad, but you can't see them. So this is one slide too far, but it doesn't matter. Not proceeding to action is a privilege. For many years, this has been my motto of sorts. I was an artist at the Center for Political Beauty. It has already been mentioned. Between 2011 and 2019, I did radical political performance art in Austria. What is quite well known is the following. Many thought that we had overthrown the Kurz government, and maybe we have. Who knows? It's still a secret. But on top of that little thing, especially we thought big when it came to our performance art. For example, we did a campaign against the borders surrounding Europe. What we wanted to do is to take a close look at human dignity in Europe and Germany, and that it should also be upheld in the Mediterranean Sea and also outside of Europe. So you can see very well in this picture a monument that was built in order to commemorate all those who had died at the German border. We took this monument in 2019, and then we brought it to the new borders where people are going to die in the future. And this grabbed a lot of headlines. And this kind of attention, we used it in order to take 2 busloads of people to the European external borders in order to reenact how the Iron Curtain fell way back then. And as you might imagine, we went down there, although we knew that we would not be able to do it. But what was important to us was not so much to achieve it, but it was important to proceed to action, to get started, to join forces when it comes to proceeding to action. In 2017, after 9 months of research, a miniature Holocaust monument, which you can see here, was transported to the neighboring garden of the AfD building. After Mr. Höcke said in 2020 that the Germans are the only people building a monument of shame. And this was just after the AfD had made it to the German parliament, and this sent shock waves through the political landscape. And for us, this monument was just a little sign, but a sign that there were some kind of resistance of the citizens against this kind of ideology. Not proceeding to action is a privilege. I still believe it because I'm firmly convinced that many people affected by the climate emergency, well, that many people cannot decide whether they want to proceed to action or not, because this kind of action would mean a threat to their livelihoods. We still maybe can retreat to our private lives, but at the same time, I was always interested in the question, why are there some people who proceed to action and why are there some people who do not proceed to action? And I want to tell something especially to the young people here of the 15-year-old Cesy. You can see her here in this picture. I wasn't like Smilla. When I was 15, I felt super lonely, super powerless, as if I couldn't move anything on this earth. I was born and raised in a little suburb close to Stuttgart, and there were no political people around me apart from my feminist mom, but I didn't find her that cool way back then. Sorry for that, Mom. But apart from that, people played soccer and they got drunk And the biggest goal was to work at Daimler, at the Daimler factory. And way back then, I discovered hip-hop. I found a community. It had been mentioned several times how important it is to find a community that you can join. And I joined these young people who were that different from the young people I grew up with. They had been affected by violence, for example. But there was a wish that united us. We wanted to express ourselves in art. And if you think that we continued on this pathway and all of a sudden Cesy took 2 stages, then I can tell you that things take a lot more time than it seems. It took 15 years to develop into a participant of the Center for Political Beauty, to find my kind of political expression. Sometimes it takes some time, so please be patient. The Center for Political Beauty has given me something very important, an incredible privilege, and this is attention. I was allowed to stand on stages and to talk about our campaigns. And I realized that these campaigns can trigger something in people. This light bulb moment triggering people to proceed to activism full of humor. It was somehow this David against Goliath moment, so small activists against the big fascists or against the European external borders. Also, the climate emergency is that big, but we need the big narratives telling us, I am small, but I can potentially do it. I can also proceed to action, even if I'm just small and powerless. And more, I wanted to do something to establish something that carries this idea well into the future. And in 2019, together with my colleague Katharina Havenrich, I founded the Radical Daughters. Radical Daughters. So we also bring our ideas to vocational schools, to rural areas, to young people who think that they are apolitical and who do not think that they are people who can change something. And we get these activist ideas to them, and we transform powerlessness and the lack of courage into performance campaigns. These are the Radical Daughters. We work with the methods of performance art. Here you can see them. These are 11 methods that we have been using, and if you feel like it, tomorrow you can experience these campaigns live during a workshop. But in order to come back to the sentence revolving around the privilege, it's a privilege to proceed to action. I have seen very clearly, if we talk to people, well, very often they can't make heads or tails of these things, because very often they feel like they lack courage, they feel powerless, and we work with very specific methods, and I would like to introduce these methods briefly to you. The first method refers to the topic of anger. So if we want to be honest and courageous, then of course we have to acknowledge that very often we feel powerless and as if we are lacking courage. Then it can be very helpful to come together in a community and to share these feelings and to admit that at the moment we cannot take to the streets and that at the moment we are lacking courage. So admitting powerlessness and anger. So very often this triggers something. Step by step we are courageous enough to formulate a very specific thing. What is it that makes us courageous? What is it that makes us angry? What makes us angry? What do we want to change? What do we want to achieve? And to utter this as a collective and to proceed to specific action, this is the first step towards courage. And thirdly, of course, we have to have visions. We talk so frequently about the things that make us powerless, so that in a collective we have to learn to again develop visions, visions of a better world, an idea of a better world, of the things that are worth fighting for. And we do it together in our workshop, and we use performance art. Performance art methods help us to take people on board at an emotional level when it comes to the idea of imagining a better world. And last but not least, so form groups. This is so important. I think this evening we have experienced such a beautiful moment. We see what happens when we form groups very consciously and to acknowledge ourselves as groups. This is so important. And what has been ruffling my feathers is the bashing of several activist groups being pitted against each other. It's so very important to have people in parliament fighting against the climate emergency. It's so important to have people taking to the street, challenging politicians on a critical note. We need all these activities. I would like to close off my presentation by a quotation by Joanna Macy, and I would like to remind you of the fact that the things that will make us most powerless is becoming less and less emotional when it comes to our own reactions, so that we do not react anymore to the things that are happening around us. On this note, I wish you all a strong voice in the future. Be courageous. Thank you very much. And stay in touch. Thank you. Thank you so much, Cesy. So now we've hit the home stretch. Thank you very much, dear Cesy, for your inspiring presentation. Fortunately, we've come together here, and luckily enough, we can go to the Mirror Hall after this presentation, after the next presentation, and form groups. Now I would like to introduce two ladies who are very, very serious about activism. Mina Hagen-Canaval of the Extinction Rebellion, the last generation. Please give it up for Mina Hagen-Canaval. And the woman for which we've all come. So the founder of the EARTHtalks, Angie Rattay. Thank you so much. This is a man without whom we couldn't have organized this event. So there are several anniversaries that we want to celebrate. Neon Green Network, this is the association behind the EARTHtalks that were founded by you, Angie Rattay. So we are having our 15th anniversary, but we are still that young. So, taking stock of the last 15 years, what can you tell us? So I founded the best group over the last 15 years. Thank you very much to my team. It's always great fun working with you. 15 years of hard work. So 15 years ago, I was at my first climate conference. I talked with Katrin Rogenhofer about her first climate conference in Copenhagen, which was a bad start, of course, a very bad idea. But, of course, I also saw the advantages of such climate conferences, networking with other activists, getting to know great speakers such as Heïdi Sevestre. But still, the insights that I gained way back then were the same. But, of course, so yesterday, I came across a quotation. Yesterday, we stood at the edge of the abyss. Now we are have come one step further. And sometimes I feel like that, because very often, we are still playing for time while being under extreme pressure. We are waging a war against the planet and thus a war against the human race itself. And if we continue our ways, so we will think back to these times and say we knew it and we haven't done anything. Mina, so you came to activism via Extinction Rebel. You are the press spokesperson of the last generation. What was your light bulb moment when you decided to become active?
I think there wasn't any such light bulb moment. I remember I was 15, I was in school, we talked about the Amazon rainforest, and there was a pie chart, and there was a caption saying, the Amazon is our green lung, the Amazon rainforest, we need it as an oxygen reserve to keep our climate stable. And then this pie chart, well, there was, indicated that 50% of this lung had already been amputated. Well, I failed to understand. Well, it's like being at war against our very basics of our livelihood. And then I noticed that buying toothbrushes made of bamboo and maybe driving less with a car, well, that is not enough. And then I thought what to do about this, and then I wound up at Last Generation and Extinction Rebellion. Well, you understood very early what Heïdi tried to tell us today. There are some things that are non-negotiable. There are just naked truths that cannot be denied. Something that we are now seeing in Austria, as you said, Cesy, is that sometimes we talk about the form of protest rather than the content. So we're not sure whether all kinds of protests are helpful and serve the cause, or maybe scare some people away from these ideas. So what's your idea? How far should a protest go? I think this is very difficult, and I don't like saying this in general terms. You need to take a close look at what it is that you protest against, and then what are you in favor of. And then as far as the climate crisis is concerned, I think it is very difficult to say how the last generation are being criminalized in Germany, especially how they do house searches. They're treated like terrorists. And like you said, it's about our livelihoods. It's about naked survival. It's about everything. And the way in which the government and also sometimes the media speak out against it, and I'm not saying, hey, let's stop talking about methods of protest, but what is it that these people are trying to point our attention to? I think this is terrible. I think you need to be well grounded in yourself, in your position, I guess, Mina, as an activist. No, I'm just a fan of survival, of my own survival. So I don't want to experience a future of famines, droughts, a shortage of drinking water. I don't want to see this happening, and I'm ready to do everything to prevent that from happening. The only reason I'm sitting here is that the institutions that are supposed to protect us have failed. We heard how the Constitutional Court simply rejected the claims on formal grounds rather than dealing with the content of it. So, of course, these petitions that were advertised here today are important, so sign them. But I don't want you to leave here and think that that's enough. No, it's not enough. We need you out on the streets. Otherwise, there's no way, because our politicians are not going to move of their own accord. And this takes me to you, here, President. You are a father. So my daddy does everything to protect me. I ask you as a father, are you doing enough to protect your children? You are the federal president. You're the most powerful man here. I'd like to ask you to think about whether you're doing everything you can to protect all of us. You have a great political voice. I'd like to ask you to use it whenever you can. I do not believe, well, I've always been diplomatic also towards people who sometimes have really negative policies. But anyway, that's what children want to hear. If my father were to give me such an answer, I wouldn't be satisfied with it. I think we need to think about the political contribution we have to make. And the stronger our political voice is, the more important our political contribution will be. We need to be out on the streets, and the institutions that are protecting us need to do these things. I think you're being understood. Angie, how do you believe things are going to play out? Well, in 2016, we had the former editor-in-chief of The Guardian here, and the first person in touch with Edward Snowden. Ellen Rosbridger said, when we live in exceptional times, we need people who break rules. So we live in exceptional times. This is why we need rule breakers. Now I'm wondering how exceptional should times become if scientists are already forecasting that there will be summers when we can't leave our houses because it'll be too hot. I understand extreme forms of protest completely, but I'm worried, just like many other people are, about these different methods and the anger of this civil population. But I think that the anger should be against the parliaments in this world, because we have some politicians here who, of their own interest, are thinking only in terms of legislatures and not in times of people's lives and generations. Well, I told you, you will be stirred up and hopefully also inspired. You heard from Cesy, if you want to learn, or if you need to be nudged, or if you want to learn how to be creative about political activism, tomorrow there will be a workshop in the Design Forum in the Museum Quarter. There are tickets that you can buy at the shop outside. There will be a film screening, System Change, a documentary, on the 24th of October in the Filmhaus am Spittelberg. I hope that several gangs will form today, and these are places where you can meet again and, well, make plans. A big thank you to Mina, Hagen-Canaval and Angie Rattay. Thank you very much. All right, and we'll close the evening with art, with poetry, an Austrian slam poetry expert with presentations all over Europe. She represented Austria also at European Championships. A big round of applause for Elif Duygul. Hello, I'm very pleased to be here today. Thank you for the invitation. I was going to write a text about the climate crisis, and I thought, what can I tell you? So much has been said already. So we should use coffee to go cups. And I wish this coffee to go cup could save the world, but I became really angry. This is a rant about Austrian politics. So have fun. This is not a climate text where I'm going to tell you that our Earth is sacred, important, and our home, because, of course, that's what it is. We've talked about it so many times, and we've heard it so many times that hopefully by now everyone in this room is aware of it. This is not a text where I'm going to tell you, hey, people, we need to be careful, really careful, because otherwise our planet is going to be plagued by uncontrollable chain reactions. I don't need to explain you that, because science and also the kids of Fridays for Future have already said it 1,000 times. So this is not a text where I'll explain to you to buy products that don't burden the environment, because of course you should consume more environmentally consciously and try to produce as little waste as possible. But I have to tell you quite honestly that I don't think that we will save the world through our consumption behavior alone. These are fairy tales they're telling us, and greenwashing, so a kind of capitalism. So again, what actually took us to this point? No. This is a text about how angry I am that obviously many politicians just pose with their Fridays for Future kids in front of the cameras for good PR and more votes for the next elections, but they don't seem to care about climate protection and the children. This is a text about how angry I am when politicians who obviously don't care about the climate crisis brag about how many billions of euros they're spending on climate protection without mentioning at the same time that they're pumping the same amount of money also into the fossil fuel industry, and they're thus pouring oil on the fire. This is a text about how angry I am that they're always pointing to China and the US when they're saying, well, why should we do this or that and renounce doing this or that if they continue to pollute so much? Should Austria save the world, they're saying? Well, we're only responsible for a small fraction of CO2 emissions, and yes, of course, that is true, but what kind of argument is that? Nobody expects Austria to save the world, and we could even save the world if we wanted to. We're really way too small for that, but to overcome this climate crisis is like doing group work in school, and everybody needs to chip in. Unfortunately, you can't simply copy from your neighbor during the break. And where would we be if we were just pointing fingers? How old are we, 7? I mean, measures to protect the climate are first and foremost important for people in this country, so that we have fertile soils, clean water, and clean air. That's how simple it is. This is a text about how frustrated I am when our Chancellor gives a speech in which he says, and I quote, this apocalyptic doomsday scenario which is portrayed, I believe, is a task of political leaders to clearly counter this. I would just say the way this doom is sketched, well, there is no scientific evidence for that. Well, I'm saying, yes, there is proof. For example, the IPCC report. This is a text about how frustrated I am because we know that Austria actually has the money and the possibilities to take measures, but it doesn't. This is a text about how frustrated I am because it is still mainly about profit. This is a text about how frustrated I am because people get upset about climate stickers, but they make fun of them and they mock them instead of thinking about how desperate people must be to take such actions. This is a text about how frustrated I am that political blockades are not lifted instead. Everything is progressing way too slowly and nothing is happening. This is a text about how powerless I feel and how tired I am, and I'm grateful for all the kids and all the activists who regularly and tirelessly take to the streets. This is a text about how proud I am when I see little kids or young people themselves organizing protests and going out to demonstrate. And now that I'm slowly coming to the end of this text, you're probably wondering where the hopeful and encouraging message is before I leave this stage. Well, I don't have one, because we are running out of time, and if I gloss over everything, then that's a chance I'm missing here to tell you that we need a lot more pressure and protest against politics. So my last sentence I want to share with you before I leave the stage. We still have a lot of work ahead of us. See you at the next protest march on the street. Lift we go, ladies and gentlemen. Final words, my dear. What is the take-home message for the people who have been listening for hours? What a wonderful audience. So what is the message they should take back? Let's summarize it in, let's say, 60 seconds. René. Well, I think I can be a lot shorter than that. I want to share something positive with you. I want you to go out in nature, get to know nature, because you love what you know and you will protect what you love. That's it. It's your turn. I believe today we heard so many different speeches, and I believe that it is important when it comes to taking decisions, you should remember how all the others are doing, and it's about all of us. Thank you. Thank you, Smilla. Levi? I think it's important to turn this frustration into action. So be bold, form gangs, and activism and climate protection is it. Heïdi.
Don't wait for a miraculous technology to save us. The miracle is in each and every single one of you. You are the best people to tackle the climate and the biodiversity today. Don't waste any time. Tomorrow morning, as you get to work, as you get to school, speak to your classmates, speak to your colleagues, to your employees, to your elected individuals, and wake them up.
Wow, dem allen ist eigentlich nichts mehr hinzuzufügen.
Wow, there's nothing to be added to this, really. So, Louisa Neubauer once said, having hope means hard work. And I thought, well, not having any hope is also strenuous, right? So decide in favor of hope, but having hope doesn't mean to be naive. I think you should use your hope to mobilize others. Give other people hope. Tell them that it is worth going down this pathway. Right. Now I would like to thank you for having come. Thank you for being inspired. Thank you for all those who joined us on this stage, who provide us with arguments, ideas, inspirations that will now help us to take action. We need courage to take action. As we've heard, a big thank you goes out to all those who are not visible, but who worked behind the scenes today to make sure that we could organize this event in the first place. It wouldn't be EARTHtalks if we didn't have everybody on the stage, all the volunteers. Please do join us. A huge round of applause for our volunteers. For our group picture on the stage. A huge round of applause for all of these volunteers. it's important for them to participate in such events, and they have given us their time, their labor, their ideas. Now that we're here, let's take a group picture with everybody who was on the stage. Maybe the federal president, if you have the time, would be glad to have you on our group picture. And we'd like to thank Manuela, our facilitator of this evening. Thank you. And now that we're taking pictures here, of course, it is wonderful when you're in a picture while you have your mouth open because you're speaking. Well, this is some final information for you. First of all, thank you very much to all the partners of EARTHtalks. Those are the organizations and ministries that are making it possible for us to have this meeting. The next EARTHtalks will be on the 17th of October 2024. See you there. Right. Save the date. Mark your calendar. And, well, the donation boxes would help us make sure that we can come back next year. And I'm messing up the final picture, because we need this backdrop for the pictures. But anyway, we have to evacuate this room, but in the adjoining room you will find food and drink and the possibility of networking. So have a pleasant evening and thank you for coming. Bye-bye.